Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's panel discussion. Thank you all very, very much for being here. We'll wait a minute or two for people to log on, but please start coming into the comments and letting us know where you are from, where you are this evening. And if you want to let us know how you found out about tonight's event, we would love to know that as well. And then we'll get started. We have wonderful panelists who are joining us this evening. So I think we are all going to have a really nice conversation. And welcome from San Diego. Hi, Dustin. Welcome from New York. Glad to see everybody here tonight. I hope everyone is doing well. We're here in September already. Who can believe that we're actually talking about the high holidays? It's kind of hard to believe. It feels like just yesterday we were talking about Passover, and now we're talking about the high holidays. Welcome from Australia. How nice to have you here. Thank you for being here. And Lisa from Long Island, we appreciate that. Looking forward to your input tonight as well, once we get started and have our panelists speaking. We'll give it just another minute to let people sign on, get comfortable. And then we'll begin. Someone else from New York, Zachary, glad to have you here tonight. All right, why don't we get started? Because there are some really wonderful people who are going to be speaking tonight. So I want to get them on camera so you can hear them. So I will officially welcome you. I'm Jody Graber. I'm the East Coast Engagement Manager for Jewish Veg. Thank you again for joining us. Please continue to share where you are from in the comments, and please feel free to post any questions you have. We will have time toward the end for some Q&A, and we want to hear from you. For those of you who may not be familiar with Jewish Veg, this year we are celebrating our 45th anniversary. For nearly a half a century, we have been the Jewish voice of the plant-based movement. Our mission is to inspire and assist Jews to embrace a plant-based lifestyle as an expression of the Jewish values of compassion for animals, care for our health, and our environment. And there are several ways we work to share this mission. We do have some immersive experiences, such as a vegan birthright trip, which, as you can imagine, was canceled this year, and hopefully we will be back in Israel next year. We also help other Jews. We educate other Jews to share the values of a plant-based movement, a plant-based diet, through our Speakers Bureau. And we've been doing that virtually. I'm currently preparing two talks coming up in the next month or two, right after the high holidays. So please contact us if you are interested in having someone from our organization speak to your synagogue virtually. And we do have regional chapters. We have a chapter in Washington, D.C., in New York City, in Los Angeles, and we are starting a new chapter in San Francisco. So anyone on the West Coast, Northern California, we would love to have you a part of the Jewish Veg chapter. And we also participate in public campaigns such as Kaporos, and that's why we're here this evening to talk to you about Kaporos. I also do want to mention we recently launched a very important campaign. It is called Toward a Pandemic-Free World. We know that the choice of a plant-based food system is going to help prevent the next zoonotic outbreak. And we also know that a plant-based diet can help all of us survive this current pandemic. So I invite you to go to pandemicfree.org and please check out all the information on the campaign. And now for what you've been waiting for the panel, I first want to thank Shemayim for partnering with us for this presentation. Thank you, Lisa Appelberg, for being here. Lisa is the director of Shemayim Jewish Animal Advocacy, which is a national nonprofit that teaches the Jewish community about veganism and animal advocacy, through programs, education, and training. And Shemayim is also supporting and connecting the growing Jewish veg-leaning community. And Shemayim is pleased to be here, and we are very, very thrilled, of course, to have you here. So thank you, Lisa, for being here. And now I'm honored to present our panelists for this evening's presentation. We have Rabbi Eliyahu Soifer with us. Rabbi Eli is a Hasidic rabbi and educator. He is the founder and spiritual leader of Congregation Achdus Yisrael and a valued member of the Jewish Veg Rabbinic Council, and he is also a composer and musician. Jill Carnegie is with us. She is a strategist, activist, and animal rescuer, proud to work with the Alliance to End Kaporos and several other animal justice efforts. And it is also my honor to introduce Sarah Eifler, who is the incredibly dedicated program director for Jewish Veg. So thank you all. Thanks to all of you for being here this evening. We are going to go around. I'm going to ask some questions. We will have a conversation, and then, of course, take some questions toward the end. So I'm going to start with you, Rabbi Eli, if I may. And could you please give us a little overview of what Kaporos is and what it is like to participate?
Sure. First, I want to know, what time is it in Australia?
What time is it in Australia? I don't know. Is it like?
I think there's 14 hours ahead of us. If I'm not mistaken.
Wow, it's early in the morning there.
Yeah, are people from Australia? Please let us know what time it is there.
Yeah, so I want to wish everybody on the panel and all our viewers the traditional wish and blessing for a happy, sweet new year. We should all be written and sealed in the right book, and all the plagues and catastrophes of this year should be swept away and replaced by 100 times the blessings. This time of year is a beautiful time of spiritual renewal. We have Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, coming up next week, and then we have a 10-day period of introspection where we do the real hard inner work of digging deep into how we've behaved over the past year, and whether it be in issues between ourselves and our creator, or be it between ourselves and our fellow person, or with all the beings in the world. It's a time to really give deep thought to this. And as usual, Jewish tradition is rich with visual aids and beautiful rituals to help us get there. Everyone knows about the honey for the sweet year, and the shofar blowing, different reasons for that. The one particular custom which we'll be speaking about, which is the purpose of our getting together this evening, is a custom called Kaporos. And I would like to briefly try, if I may, to do a little bit of a historical and overview of Kaporos, so as a springboard for our discussion. We find the custom, kapara means Yom HaKippurim, so that's the same word, Kippur. Kapara, kaparot means atonement, or atonement. So it's the same idea. It's an aid to help us do teshuvah, to return to our true spiritual selves during this time of year. This particular custom, it's at least 1,500 years old, possibly longer. We see it written in the responsa of the Ga'inim. This is the post-Talmudic period, and we see it discussed and written about for at least 1,500 years. And this is one of the ways in the period of time between the New Year and the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, that the Jewish people would participate in to help them in their teshuvah process. The particular custom here was, and it was not a universally accepted custom. There's some rabbinic back and forth. There were some certain objections. Although over time it did catch on, as they say. It's one of those customs that caught on, and we see it practiced today. Now, there are different methods of practicing Kaporos, and the one that's going to be brought to our attention this evening is the custom to use chickens, live chickens, for Kaporos. And I will explain briefly why a chicken and not a duck, not a cat. But the idea is as follows. As part of arousing ourselves to teshuvah, they would take, in this case, a chicken. There's a liturgy that accompanies this, a few paragraphs. They would hold the chicken, or chickens, depending on who was doing it. They would swing it around their heads a few times, and they would say this liturgy, and they would say that to God, whatever you had in store for me, let the chicken take that, and let me live in this new year a life of happiness, health, and life, and good life. And then they would take that chicken, they would give it back to the businessman who provided it. They would take it, they would shecht it, and it would be distributed to charities on the eve of Yom Kippur, on that eve of Yom Kippur. So that's a little bit of the historic background. There were two popular alternative methods of doing Kaporos. One, for people who couldn't afford a live chicken, they used a fish. And another method was people simply took the value of what they would have spent on the chicken, and they just hold the money in their hand, or they put it in a sock, whatever they do. Some people have different ways of doing it, and they swing that around the head, and then they donate that value of money to the stock of their choice, the charity of their choice. So it is extremely doable to participate in this beautiful custom without the use of a chicken. Just to tie it all up, the reason a chicken in particular, and sorry, give me the wink if I'm using up too much of time, but I thought it would be interesting to people to understand why a chicken specifically. So as you may know, the Jewish people have two languages that are important to them. And now maybe the last 1,000 years, Yiddish maybe as well, but two primary languages. One is obviously Hebrew, the Holy Tongue, and the other is a language called Aramaic, which might seem to be some kind of archaic language, but it's a language that the Jews actually spoke and used in their Talmudic teachings for many, many years. So in Hebrew, one of the words for human, man, is given. In Aramaic, the word for chicken is gever. So it's part of the exchange. The exchanging is between the gever to the gever. That's one reason. And the other very interesting reason, why not a pigeon or a dove or some other type of fowl or bird? The reason for that is very interesting, because we are not permitted to simulate or imitate anything that was done during the temple times when animal sacrifices took place. And so this is specifically not a sacrifice of any kind. There's a particular sort of a ritual. It's not a sacrifice. And we make sure that everyone realizes it's not a sacrifice by using a bird that was not used in the temple times for a sacrifice. That's why the chicken. So there's some of the historical background. And as you will see today, in the days in the week between the end of Rosh Hashanah and the eve of Yom Kippurim, you will find in certain neighborhoods, you will find in the afternoon and evening, you will find large groups. I don't know this year if there's going to be large groups, how they're going to handle that. You will find groups of people gathering in their neighborhoods, in certain neighborhoods in New York and in Israel and other places. You'll find them gathered as families and conducting this ritual of Kaporos.
Thank you, Rabbi Eli. That I appreciate that that explanation, and I do very much appreciate what you said about the fish and then the value, the donation. And I know I have questions about that, but I know we're going to talk about that a little more as we go on. So we will definitely get to that more. Could you also explain why this practice is so deeply entrenched in the Jewish community? Could you talk a little further maybe about that?
Sure. There are many customs that are entrenched, as you say, but you don't. The outside observer wouldn't necessarily know about them or see them because they're taking place in people's homes or in a synagogue. This happens to be something that's done in public. And it's something that is a little bit more difficult for an outside observer to maybe understand. It could perhaps look a little strange. There are other groups of people that might do similar types of rituals, but they do it where people don't see it and more often. But this is right out on the sidewalk, right? Walking in Brooklyn, and all of a sudden you come to a few blocks and there's people practicing Kaporos there, and it's like, whoa, what did I just step into a movie, back into the 1800s or something? So it can be jarring in that way. But so that's why this specific custom. But to answer your question, it's interesting. It is, again, the minhag, the custom of Kaporos, is a deeply entrenched custom. Doesn't have to be done, as we'll discuss with the chicken, but the thing itself. And once a custom takes hold, the Jewish people are very, very protective of their customs. Sometimes even more so than a mitzvah, a commandment or law, because over the millennium, where we've been in exile and subject to oppression of all sorts, it has been the customs that have helped to keep our community together, to survive and thrive throughout this torturous exile of 2,000 years. So the customs are the Jewish people are very protective of their customs. So that's why not that this is specifically entrenched, but all our customs are held very preciously. That's not right. Preciously. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now I'm going to switch over to Jill for a moment. Jill, as the lead organizer and strategist for the Alliance to End Chicken as Kaporos, could you tell us a little bit about the Alliance's goals and how it aims to achieve them?
Absolutely. So the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos was founded a number of years ago and has gone through several incarnations exploring different avenues and tactics to try to bring an end to the use of chickens as Kaporos. In New York City, we have a few avenues through which we can do this. Of course, one of those avenues is through open and compassionate rescue and giving the practitioners the opportunity to spare the life of the chicken, which a number of them do every year, and allow us to provide them with safe, loving homes. And also to do outreach within the community. We are thrilled that the last couple of years we've been able to partner with Jewish Veg to execute that in a way that feels a lot more like it has a lot more integrity, to have Jewish Veg really on the front line as far as the outreach during the week of Kaporos. We've also partnered with people in the community to distribute literature, to try to empower people who take a stance of compassion on how to administer Kaporos, to try to be voices and agents for change within the community. However, this is a very contentious environment And so there have also been some tactics that have been viewed as much more aggressive, and some of them have been. We've really tried to steer away from that more recently. But there have been protests and very disruptive protests as well. And we're here faced with this ritual that, when conducted in New York City, it's violating at least 15 laws every time they conduct this practice. And that's not even factoring the basic permitting laws. They don't even apply for permits for these events, even though any other group, if they wanted to have such an event, would have to apply for a permit. So, we also are exploring the political angle and really trying to hold our city and state officials accountable for the fact that they're allowing not only laws to be broken, but most of these laws live in the health codes in New York. And in fact, more than half of them are health code violations. And these are out in public. These are out in city streets. And even though we focus in Brooklyn, because Brooklyn is, of course, the highest concentration in the neighborhoods of Williamsburg, Borough Park, and Crown Heights, Kaporos with chickens is practiced in every borough in New York, including the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It's just that it happens to be on a lot that's not as accessible to activists. So we focus where it's really out in the streets. So, at this point, that's why we need to leverage that tactic as well, because this is where the laws of religion actually end up impeding on the basic law of the land as far as other citizens are concerned, because this is really an incredible health risk to the entire city. And now that we all know so much more about how epidemics and pandemics work, it may even be a threat beyond New York City as well, if it were to start here. As somebody who has been involved in the rescues and has co-coordinated the rescues.
Jill,
yes.
I'm sorry. May I just cut you off for just a minute? Because I want to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
And I definitely want to get
Go
into
right
that
ahead.
conversation. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that all up. But I do just want to go to Sarah for a moment.
Yes.
Just in talking about, these actions in Brooklyn, let's say. Sarah, for you as the program director for Jewish Veg, what's been the value of having the Jewish presence on site alongside the Alliance?
Yeah, thank you, Jody. And I think the point that Jill was making is so important and something that really needs to be addressed. But I also really want to talk about what it means for us to be there as a Jewish presence, speaking to our fellow Jews in this community, and how really essential that is for these actions to be effective. And so some of, what Jill's talking about right now, some of these health and policy tactics, that's not really what we're involved in, and that's not what we do at Jewish Veg. That is a separate tactic. And so what we do at Jewish Veg and Shemayim is, I think, so essential to really getting our Jewish community speaking about these issues. And so the way that we've done that is that Shemayim and Jewish Veg have worked together. Shemayim has created materials in English, but also in Hebrew and Yiddish. And in these communities, people mostly speak Yiddish. So having these materials in the language that people are speaking, so not only is that a lot easier for people to take in information, but it's also really important as a sign of respect that you're going into these communities and you're addressing people in their language. The other thing is that Jewish Veg has worked really hard to develop very strict protocols around how we operate as outreach activists. All of our activists, our volunteers are trained. They undergo mandated training with us. And what we've done is we have disallowed things like chanting, signs, all of these kind of protest model tools. And that's really important because we are totally moving away from a protest. We do not want this to be a protest. That's not what this is about. This is a conversational, relational model, and it's built on trust and respect. And the way that we're doing that is that as fellow Jews who care deeply about Jewish values, Jewish law, Jewish ethics, we are able to go in and have conversations in the same frame of reference that everybody can understand. I think what's really important to consider here is, like, if someone comes up to you and starts yelling at you that, like, what you're doing is bad and wrong and you have to stop, that's not going to work. That's never going to work. It wouldn't work on me. And so we don't want to be doing that. That's not the point of what we're doing. What we want to do is to be able to approach people on a individual level and be able to say, we also care really deeply about Judaism, about our religion, about what we share as Jewish values. We know that you do too. And here's what we're seeing. And that is something called Zar Ba'alei Chaim. And it is a law. It's found in the Talmud, but it comes from multiple sources in the Torah. So it's a Torah law. And it means the suffering of animals. But what it means in practice is that we are meant not only to not cause harm to animals, but to actively prevent harm to animals. If we see animal suffering, it becomes our Jewish ethical, legal responsibility to act and to do something about that. And so when we are in the streets of Brooklyn and we're seeing these chickens in these tiny transport crates who are not being given food, not being given water, they're out there in horrible heat. Really, they're undergoing immense suffering. It becomes our responsibility as Jews to do something about that. If we are able to calmly and respectfully explain that to people who are living in these communities, that opens a conversation. And so at that point, we have a tiered ask system that we've developed with the help of Jill and the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos, which is as follows. We ask first that people provide food and water to the chickens. And one of the really amazing things that the Alliance does, along with the Save Movement and other partners, is that as we at Jewish Veg and Shemayim are having these conversations as outreach activists, they are providing food and water to the chickens as we're speaking. So the people living in these communities are seeing that this is happening, that people are providing food and water to the chickens. It becomes very demonstrably clear that that's needed. And we're at the same time, we're talking about it and we're pointing out, in the Torah, you're required, you're commanded to feed your animals before you feed yourself. These animals aren't being fed at all. That's a violation of Jewish law. And so we're able to have those conversations because we all kind of know that language. Again, calmly and respectfully, that's the key here. The point is always to have a conversation that emphasizes that we share these values. Ask number two, after we've talked about that, is that we ask people to hold the chickens more kindly. So what happens when people do kaporos with chickens? They tend to hold the chickens by their wings. And I've been trying to see how I could demonstrate this on the camera, and I don't think I can. But basically, it's like if you had your arms yanked up behind your back, and someone was holding you up by your arms, and then they swung you around your head. Right? Thank you, Jill. Jill's doing a great job here. I was trying to figure it out, and I couldn't figure it out.
That's the description I can think of.
Yeah, and it's extremely painful. If someone did that to you, it would hurt a lot. And I don't want to be too disturbing here, but one thing that really sticks with me is that these birds are in agony and they're screaming, and that sound when you're there in the streets, it's heartbreaking. And I want to be so clear here that absolutely nobody wants to be causing harm to these animals. No one wants to do that. But these are people living in a city. They don't know. They don't have that background to be able to know how to hold a chicken in a way that doesn't cause harm. And so we're able to go in and show them. And I can tell you, having performed this outreach, having done this, the relief that people have when we show them, there's a way to hold this chicken so that they're calm, they're settled, they're relaxed, and you hold them kind of against your body. That moment where this chicken kind of stops screaming, stops being in pain and agony, and is able to kind of calm and settle, that's a moment that you really see this mental shift taking place, where all of a sudden this animal is no longer this object or this tool. Now this becomes a real living, breathing creature that needs care, needs compassion, needs protection. And at that point is when we're able to say, ask number 3, would you consider using coins instead of chickens when you do this in the future? And I really want to point, what Rabbi Eli said at the beginning, that we hold tightly to our customs. And as Jews, as a Jewish person, I resonate with that. I really feel that. And that's so important. We are not there to ask people or tell people to stop doing kaporos. ever. That's not what we're doing. What we're asking is for people to use the alternatives that already exist, that have always existed. In fact, Kaporos didn't start with using chickens. It started with using young plants. And it's a process how it came to be chickens. Rabbi Eli explained about the language. There are some other things as well. That basically, we don't want people to stop doing Kaporos. It's an important ritual in the Jewish community. We want people just to be following these other Jewish laws about Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim, about treating animals with kindness and respect, and therefore using coins instead becomes not just this like what you can do if there aren't chickens, but it's even more so spiritual and important and devotional to use coins instead, because you're also preventing the suffering of animals. And one thing I'm sorry, I know I'm going on a little bit here, so I just want to end with a point that I think is so important, which is that we are talking about a period of about, technically 10 days, but it kind of ends up being about 8, where people are performing this in the streets of Brooklyn. There are animals, these chickens included, all day, every day, who are suffering immensely in factory farms. The same chickens that are used in New York City for Kaporos those are the same chickens that are bought from the factory farms that supply the chicken that ends up on people's plates. Those are the same animals. And so this mental shift that I'm talking about that happens, in the streets of Kaporos, it's not just the streets of Brooklyn that shift needs to happen. It needs to happen within the Jewish community as a whole. It is so essential for us as Jews to really start thinking about and considering and having conversations about Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim, about our imperative, our ethical, legal, Jewish imperative to prevent the suffering of animals. And that starts with what we put on our plates.
And Sarah, I just thank you for saying all that for sure. And I just want to point out, we do have Stephen Friedman. Thank you for being here and for saying what you've said here. With 25 million chickens slaughtered daily for food, the focus on Kaporos is a very, very, very small part of what the message that Jewish Veg is trying to get across. So thank you very much, Stephen, for sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate that. And then I will just have this other question from Danny Ellis. So Sarah, would you say the goal to promote animal welfare during Kaporos, or is it to liberate them eventually?
Danny, that is a great question. Thank you for asking that. It's the tactic is definitely we start by asking them to hold the chickens differently. And yes, that is more of a welfare tactic. That said, we absolutely, as our goal is to completely liberate the chickens, not have chickens used as Kaporos at all. But the way to get there, and I should be very clear about this, this is long-term change that we're talking about. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. We've had so much success, and I'm really proud of the success that we have had, and the way that some of the conversations have gone. You can also see videos of us doing this last year, and you can kind of see I have some conversations. I don't have people on camera because part of this moving away from protest model, I don't want people to feel like they're being kind of invaded in that way. But I kind of have my camera like pointed at the ground as I talk to people. You can see those videos on our Facebook page. So we do start there because we want to have, again, that shift take place. We want people to get to the point of it's important that these animals don't feel pain. That is what leads to, I can use coins instead. I don't have to participate in the system, and this system can change. So that's kind of a long way of saying the eventual goal, yes, is total liberation, absolutely. But there are steps to get there.
May I answer to that really briefly?
Yeah,
definitely. I think that there's one point here that I think is really important for us all to remember, is that Kaporos with chickens is not actually going to change the week of Kaporos.
Yes.
Nothing that we do that week is going to end the use of chickens as Kaporos. So our goal that week is to facilitate that connection with the animals as breathing, living, feeling beings, just like you and I. Because that's when the chickens are there. That's when they can see the activists providing the food and water, the activists providing care to the injured birds, and engage with Jewish Veg on the moral imperative of caring for these animals. Now, the work to transition to getting Kaporos chickens completely eradicated, that happens the rest of the year. And that's much less visible, but that goes hand in hand with shifting our entire feeling about what animals are here for. Are they here for us, or are they here for themselves? And just for being on this planet. So that's really kind of that's one shift that I think is really important for all of us to remember. Nothing we do the week of Kaporos is going to end it right there on the spot, flat out. So we're just going to be as caring to the animals as possible and help others see that that's what we want to awaken that within them to care for the animals as well.
Great point. Thank you for that. And also now going back to you, Jill, I know you touched on this a little bit in terms of the public health risk, especially during COVID. Is there anything else you want to share about the work the Alliance is doing now to raise awareness?
Right. I realize now, I think I skipped ahead because I was thinking of the pandemic tie-in to the panel when I was articulating our tactics. So this, the health code issue is very, very important. And this is true for any slaughterhouse, any animal market in New York City. It just so happens that, yes, it was mentioned that there's millions of chickens in our food system, but this is still over 100,000 baby chickens that are used for Kaporos each year just in New York City. That's a significant number of lives. And not only is that a significant number of lives, that's a significant number of pathogens, parasites, airborne disease that gets introduced into our streets, sidewalks, sewer systems, and air. In New York City, as many of us know, especially under normal circumstances, but even now, people walk through these body parts, this blood, these species, and they track the material all over the city. They walk to the subway. I've taken photos of my boots after being on the ground at Kaporos, riding the subway home, and you can see the thick layer of filth that I have tracked onto the subway. And who knows what that means when those viruses intermingle with the viruses of humans. The interesting thing this year is that now we've undergone this incredible mass education about how viruses spread, how viruses mutate. And we've also gone through a re-education of how many of these viruses start with the use, exploitation, and confinement of animals. And here we have it right out on the street, happening every year, subjecting millions of New Yorkers to, every year after this gets sick. And these are sick animals. We rescue hundreds of them a year. I can tell you firsthand experience, these are not healthy animals. They are sick.
We may have, can you hear me, Jill? We may
Yes.
have lost you from, oh, okay. Okay.
Would you like me to go into what how people can find us, or is there anything else you wanted to highlight?
We will get back to you for sure on that. Absolutely. Thank you. Rabbi Eli, I'd love to come back to you for a moment here. Could you talk to us a little bit about what the Jewish community, what we can learn as a Jewish community from the problems posed by using chickens as Kaporos?
Well, I think the approach that Sarah was describing is the way to go. It's winning hearts and minds, and it's using concepts that are familiar to Jewish people, to these people, as a segue, as an entrance into other greater discussions, which is what Sarah was alluding to. So every Jewish kid that you're going to meet on the street there during Kaporos, if you start talking about Tsar Balei, they've all learned about Tsar Balei in yeshiva and school. They've been told stories about Tsar Balei. It's just that there's a disconnect. Sometimes your parents schlep you to Kaporos, you grab the chicken, you blah, blah, blah. It's an exciting thing. It's dark and all the people, and it's an event. And there's the disconnect. But if it's brought to the attention, Tsar Balei, ooh, what do you mean? Well, how are you holding that? How are you holding the chicken? Don't you? So using Jewish values and Jewish ethics that all these people that are participating can relate to and agree with you, starting from a point of agreement, and then using that as a springboard to enter into the broader discussion about how you could be performing this important ritual. So the intersection between all the Jewish values and this particular ritual, that's the bridge. That's the bridge, and that's the way to educate. And then once you educate, then the individual, the family, will use their critical thinking skills and will hopefully come to the logical conclusion and will say, you know what, next year we're going to use money. Forget it already. I don't like the crates. I don't like the stuff in the crates. I don't like seeing the people. They're not treating the animals properly. They're not being watered properly. It's too big. 50 years ago, 70, 80 years ago, a ritual like this was done in someone's backyard with 3 or 4 neighbors. The sheikhet was right there, or the mother was there. She was the sheikhet, and it was all done, and there was a few chickens running around the backyard. Now, because it's cities and it's urbanized, and there's thousands of people crowded together, and thousands of chickens crowded into the crates. So, and we still think we're in the shtetl doing it in the backyard. But all the negatives that are associated with doing it in the environment, in the streets of Brooklyn, people don't necessarily think about it. So as Sarah said, it's all educating, bringing up things that are obvious to some, not obvious to other people, bringing things to people's attention, letting it marinate there, simmer for a while, and using that to get to the broader discussion about how in our times, how it's quite possible that actually the consumption of animal products for food might not be the wisest way to proceed, given what's going on with our environment, given what's going on with health, and the way the animals are treated on the large farms where they're kept and slaughtered. So, as Sarah said, these are small baby steps to try, because to win a war, sometimes you have to pick and choose your battles very carefully. One thing for sure, taking Hasidic Jews to court and bothering them every year with court cases and making them pay for lawyers just so that they could win again and then go back to court the next day, or move it from this parking lot to that street, chasing the Jews around with the chickens, that's one surefire way to get them to double down on using chickens for kaparas. The prophet says that the Jewish people are stiff-necked people. We're stubborn. For good ways and maybe not so good ways, but we're still here.
Well,
we're stubborn in certain ways.
Excuse me, Rabbi Eli. No, I was just going to say, and in terms of what you were saying about education, and in terms of that education, we appreciate you being here so much, because I think it is so important for all of us to hear from you and take the line from what the tradition is to how we actually can affect change. And
you know what? I don't want to
helping people to understand that. So I appreciate that.
I just want to tell you a quick story. I, for years, did kaparas with chickens. It was an annual event. And then when my kids were little, it was like I said, it was like a night out on the town. It was fun for the kids and whatnot. And we did this for years, swinging the chickens around. It was the whole tumult. And one year, this is possibly 10 years ago. Time flies, as they say. I was there, and my kids were running around, and I had a chicken. I was slugging kaparas. They say slugging kaparas. And I had a chicken, and had the thing in my hand to say the thing, and all of a sudden I froze. I froze in my spot, like I was stuck to the ground. I didn't know where I was. And I felt an energy. I felt the life energy of that chicken, the fear. I felt the fear, and it sort of started with my hand, and it just enveloped me, and I felt as if I were feeling what the chicken, what that. I know that sounds crazy. I'm sorry. I
It
wasn't.
doesn't sound crazy at all.
Not at all.
And I just sort of and I took the chicken, and I was shocked to my core. I took the chicken, I gave it back to the guy. I said no, and I walked away. And from that moment on, I've never done it with chickens again. This is my personal. It happened to me. I don't know if it ever happened to anybody else, but I'm saying that. Oh, the opening up of the mind, the opening up of the spirit, is such a powerful thing. Sometimes it can come from a kind word, like Sarah explaining kindly to a young person or an adult, about how you hold the chicken properly. Sometimes sometimes we get the message, God sends us the message from the chicken itself. But we have to pick up on, God is sending us messages all day, every day. We just have to, tune in to capture the signal. We have to have our minds free and open to it. But the way to get there is to not build walls between ourselves and the other. Sorry to take up.
No, thank you very, very much for sharing that story. I think that story is really, really meaningful for a lot of people, and it does not sound crazy at all. We know the animals are living, breathing beings, so they have spirit, you have spirit, and there's a connection, the soul's connection, absolutely. So and so to hear that from you means a lot, and clearly, as we can see, there was a comment that people agree with you. We want to educate more and do what we can to hopefully create more of you. If we could clone you, so people have the feelings that you have, but that's certainly what we want to be doing. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. This comment, just to comment on this comment that it's gone already, but this is such an important point that I brought up in the past. Hearing it from this one and that one. Oh, thank you, Bobby. Hearing it from an outsider is one thing, no matter how kindly and the good intentions are. These are communities that they listen to their leadership. They listen to their community authorities, the rabbinic authorities of their particular. They may not even listen to the 5 blocks away, that guy, but their guy, that's who they're going to listen to. And there's a top guy, and then under him there's 3 semi-top guys, and then there's a chain of authority in these communities. And if you work yourself in through the top, it's got to be top down. This is the point that I believe Bobby is trying to impress upon us, and I agree with him 100%. To go to each individual, convincing, if they hear from the top down, no more chickens, no more. We would prefer that you do it with money from now on. XYZ is the reason. Shalom Yisrael. That's the end of the story. You win. Everybody wins. So that is a beautiful strategy to try and seek meetings with the leadership of the different communities to just educate them in a friendly, non-threatening way. Yeah. Jill raised her hand.
I do.
Please.
We've been doing that for years.
I know. Yes, Jill.
And I enthusiastically agree with Bobby that it's the leaders who are of these communities, the congregation leaders, who are the change makers. If it was a bottom-up approach, like it is in many other communities, then we probably would not be seeing very many chickens being used anymore. Because even as a non-Jewish individual, I cannot tell you how many exchanges I've had with practitioners who have told me that they cry every year for the chicken who was killed for them, but that they have to do it because their rabbi told them that they have to use a chicken. And so we have no problem engaging with people one-on-one and getting them to agree with us. But the people who benefit from hosting these events, using chickens particularly, they are extraordinarily resistant to this. And we have individuals who have made it, pretty far into the community with their relationship building. Anyone who's interested in not only agreeing that chickens should not be used, but who actually wants to stand up and be a change maker, in the community, we would love to do whatever we could to empower that individual to help that initiate from within. Because of course, that would be the ideal scenario. We've just yet to come across any of those individuals who are willing to do that.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. And there is a question here that I'm curious from all of the standpoints here. Has the custom increased over the last few years? Have you seen an increase, Jill?
It certainly appears to be, but it's hard for us to know for certain because these communities are so insular. So it's hard for us to know for sure. We do know that the estimates that we've gotten on the number of chickens used for Kaporos in one of the communities in Crown Heights has increased from an estimated 50,000 each year to 60,000 each year, just in Crown Heights alone. So I would venture to guess that that would indicate that this is on the rise.
Although I think one thing to point out there is that it's on the rise in specific places,
Yes.
in specific geographies. And one thing that that has happened is that there are places in Israel where it's actually not allowed to be practiced, and part of that is the public health risk. So, you know, there's increase in some ways, but there's also in other places, in other ways, there's been movement away from this, from using chickens as Kaporos specifically.
In California,
and so we see both sides.
It's diminished. So in New York specifically, it appears to be on the rise.
Okay.
But in other locations, it is on the decline. And yes, I was mentioning there are 4 municipalities in Israel that have banned the use of chickens, and I believe 3 of the 4 they actually cited primarily the animal welfare concerns, you know, conflicting. You know, that Kaporos was then conflicting with Jewish law with regard to animals.
Wow. Okay.
In addition to the public health issues, of course.
Yes. Yeah. Sarah, can you talk a little bit about what it is like being in the streets as an activist? Can you talk a little more about that?
Sure. Yeah. It's you know, it's a really interesting kind of situation to be in, where as an animal rights activist, seeing animal suffering is very painful. And as a Jewish person who is very deeply, I really, you know, care very deeply about Jewish law, Jewish tradition, and being a part of a Jewish community, you know, I think that there's a sense that those things oppose in some ways, and they don't have to. And I think that's really what being in the streets has kind of done for me personally, is show me this way to use the Jewish devotion that I have, and the Jewish ethics and laws that I take so seriously and care so deeply about, and speak to people about that, and to be able to connect with people on those points that, you know, they also feel that way. And it really becomes this moment of connection, of relation that's deeply beautiful, even in the midst of something that is very painful to kind of see and feel. And so, you know, the specifics of being on the streets, and I understand some people kind of may have trouble picturing this. So what really happens is you have like a truck, this giant truck, and it's stacked full of these crates, and there are tons of chickens kind of shoved in these little crates. And as Jill was saying, some of them are sick, some of them don't make it. It's really heartbreaking to see like these kind of just stacks of crates of chickens. And in front of those crates, you have people who are kind of handing over chickens to people in the community who are then performing the ritual. And so as Jewish Veg outreach activists, we tend to be kind of with the people, and we're kind of mingling, talking to people. I mostly talk to women. As a woman, that's just part of the way that it operates in these communities. And so the women that I speak to tend to be, as I think what has been said, you know, they tend to be so relieved, and they talk about, some of them talk about, you know, how painful this is for them as well, as Jill was talking about. And so being able, again, to have that conversation, have that relationship. And I do feel like that is a really beautiful moment to be in, even though it can be very difficult to be there in person. One thing I want to say is that we're not, as Jewish Veg, we are not doing outreach this year. And part of that is because with COVID-19 and with the extra protections that are needed, it would honestly not be possible to do it in the same way and to be able to have these conversations in the same way. So we're not going in the streets this year at Jewish Veg. This panel is one part of what we're doing instead to continue this conversation. However, the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos, they are going out and providing, again, food and water to the chickens as they do every year. And so I think we will be talking about like how you can participate in that. But just know for next year, Jewish Veg will be out again. We will be doing outreach. We will be training volunteers. If you'd like to participate in that, we'd love to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, hopefully next year, COVID will be a thing of the past and we will be able to mingle with the community. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I just want to ask Jill and Rabbi Eli if there's anything else that you would like to leave with us tonight.
Well, I think Rabbi Eli should probably close us out. I feel like that would make the most sense. So I'll just throw out there that, again, as Sarah mentioned, this is all feeding into the greater food system as well, because these chickens are purchased from the very same factory farms that supply chickens to become parts of a Caesar salad or what have you. And anyone who wrestles with whether or not this is something that's worthy of the dedication that so many of us feel for this particular issue, I would offer to you, if you come out and witness it, as Sarah has tried to illustrate, it's very difficult to imagine what it is until you're there. But once you've been there in the street and witnessed it yourself, it changes you, and it becomes your moral imperative to do anything you can for these 5-week-old birds who are suffering every year in our streets, even if it's a smaller number than in our food system. That being said, we will be providing additional PPE for activists this year. We have been providing that in previous years as well, but this year we're adding in the option of goggles or face shields as well. And we're going to have the full coveralls available every single day of actions. So for anyone who does want to be on the ground this year and feels safe doing so, then you are welcome to join us. We do have the event page up at the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos on Facebook. The information will be populated in that one place as intel comes in, and we know what days which sites will be operating so that we can plan our actions accordingly. And for those of you that wish to support the rescue efforts as well, you can reach out to us through that event page too. And we've actually placed more chickens than ever across the country this year. So we do have a significant rescue effort still underway. So we're looking for people in all ways, in the streets, as donors, or as other types of support. So if you want to participate, I have a job for you. Reach on out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jill. Rabbi Eli.
All right. Before I forget, I want to thank Jill, Jody, Sarah, and the invisible Shemayim lady. Wherever she went to. Looking down at, oh, there you are. Looking down at us from Shemayim.
Lisa's here.
No, here is the Basco, But if we have time, I'm going to try and make it within the 2 minutes. Hasidim, we like to tell stories. So if you don't mind, I'd like to finish with a story, with a Hasidic tale. Is that all right?
Yes, please.
Okay. So there was a famous Hasidic master. His name was the Rabbi Eli Melech of Lezhensk. So one year, Erev Yom Kippur, on the eve of Yom Kippur, a gentleman from a faraway town came knocking on the Rebbe's door. Come in. How can I help you? So the man said, listen to me. Every year I do Kaporos. Now is the time for Kaporos. But I've traveled by carriage, by foot, for hundreds of miles, because I know that you are a tzaddik, you are a righteous man, and I want to see how you do Kaporos. So the rabbi looked at him and said, "What do you? I do what everyone else does, No. Please show me how you do it." So the Rebbe looked at him and said, "If you really want to see a Kaporos that means something, go to such and such a town and look up such and such a Jew." So right away he ran out. He went to the town and he looked up the address. It was a bar. It was a bar, a kretschmer. It was an inn run by a Jewish fellow. in the Ukraine over here. He opens it up and he sees the Jewish guy behind the tending bar, pouring the beer, pouring the whiskey. And he says to the man, he says, "Can I hang out here today?" And yeah, sure. If you buy drinks, you can hang out. No problem. So he waited and he waited for the last customer to leave. Finally, closed up the door, and the bartender forgot that this man was sitting in the corner behind the wood-burning stove, watching what's going to happen. He calls out to his wife, "Chanala, please bring me my little notebook that's on the left dresser." Okay. She brings over the book. He opens it up with a little string, and he starts to read. He starts to read from the book. Oy vey, oy vey. I yelled 50 times at my wife. Oy vey, I didn't go to shul like I was supposed to go to shul. I was watching the football game. Oy vey. And he starts to read his whole list of sins. And as he's reading, his eyes are filling up with tears. And he's just bawling. He's beside himself. And finally, he gets to the end of the book. It was a pretty long book. He gets to the end of the book, reading out loud all his, what he considered to be his big sins of the year. And he gives a hard clap on the bar. And he says, "Chanala, now bring me my other book on the right dresser." She brings in the book. He opens it up. He starts to read. "This year, my brother passed away. This year, I made half the amount of money I made last year. This year, we had a COVID-19. And he goes through a whole long list. And he says, "You know what? I'll tell you what we're going to do." He takes this book. He takes this book. He ties them together with a string. And he starts to swing it around his head. "Zeh Khalifosi, this is my exchange. Zeh Timurasi, this is my expiation. Zeh Kaporos, this is my atonement." And he takes it and he chucks it right out through the window. And he says, "God, that's my kaparis. Even good." So I wish all of us and all the people listening and watching all around the world, and all Jewish people and all animals and all plants and everybody, everything in our world, that we should be blessed. We'll call it even. We're calling it even. No hard feelings either way. I'm going to try and do better. You try and do a little bit better. Let's see what we can put together. And we should all be blessed with a beautiful, sweet, happy new year, full of good living for all who needs a good living, a refuah, good health for all who need good health, and a beautiful, happy life together.
Wow. Thank you very much. That excuse me, that is a wonderful way to end, I believe. So thank you very, very much for sharing that story with us. I do want to reiterate that we posted the Facebook page for the Alliance to End Chicken-Est Kaporos. We will send that out in an email tomorrow. Please be sure when you go to that Facebook page, go to the events and look up the actions and click on interested or going. If you are able to go and want to go, that is where all of the updates will be posted, so you will know what's happening. That's the best way to find out what is happening. I want to thank you, Jill, Sarah, Rabbi Eli, for sharing so much with us tonight. We can see there are some comments coming in. It's hard for me to see all of them as you're speaking, but there are so many people who have really been moved and touched by what everyone has shared tonight. So thank you very, very much for taking the time and sharing that. Thank you all of the viewers who are here, who may be watching this on the replay. We really appreciate you being here and helping us to understand what Kaporos is and to share how people can change. We don't want people, we certainly don't want our fellow Jews not to have their traditions. Tradition is important for all of us. We just hope that it can be done a little differently. thank you to Lisa and Shemayim for co-hosting this evening. We appreciate you, Lisa, and we thank you so much for always, for being by our side.
Thank you.
I want to, sorry, thank you. And I want to remind everyone, I did mention at the beginning of the broadcast about our Pandemic Free World campaign. I invite you to go to pandemicfree.org to learn more about this very critical campaign that affects all of us. We have all been shuttered for, what is it now, 6 months or so because of this pandemic. And we know that by shifting to a plant-based diet, we can prevent the next pandemic and survive this one. I want to also say that our work is possible because of donors who support our mission. If you are able to make a donation, your money helps us to do this very important work, to connect with the people, to spread this mission. If you are able to make a donation, please, again, visit pandemicfree.org and support this vital campaign and this vital mission so that we can help individuals one by one to transition to a plant-based diet. And also want to wish everyone who's viewing this a very happy and healthy, sweet New Year. May we all have a very healthy and happy New Year. And good night, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.